Hello, I'm Paul Briley, and you're listening to Off the Comma. I'm a human who cares about supporting other humans. On this podcast, we'll explore all facets of what it means to feel stuck in life. We talk with people just like us who have found themselves sitting on a comma and not knowing where to go next. We'll unpack the experience with them, where they've been stuck, what it feels like, what they experienced, and what they learned. My goal is to inspire you by seeing yourself in others. I believe that when we feel more connected and seen, magic can happen. So I am super excited about this episode. One, because now we are more than 10 episodes in on Off the Comma, the podcast. So I want to acknowledge that. I'm super excited about what we're creating here. And I'm just so excited and privileged to be able to do this. This is really cool and fun. And you'll hear me talk more about this in future episodes. But also very exciting is today I'm going to be talking with Cami McLaren, who I am going to let her introduce herself, obviously. But I'm going to talk about her for a little bit. So Cami is my coach, trainer, and teacher, and coach, and friend. And I just want to acknowledge her for a moment before we let her start talking, because in many ways, this podcast has been shaped by Cami and has her fingerprints on it, because the training that I went through Transformative Coaching Essentials in 2021 and 22, that program that taught me how to be a coach and that I have now put into practice has also brought me to this place. This work that we're doing in the Off the Comma podcast and my coaching practice has all been shaped and influenced by the things that you've taught me and the things I've learned through your programs, and then obviously your mentorship, Cami. So a little promotional or not so promotional acknowledgement of you, but I wanted to get that in right up front and say thank you. And it's so cool to have you here in this space because of the fingerprints that you have on it. So there you go.
Thank you, Paul. I am honored to be here. First off, the fact that you are over 10 episodes is so exciting. I've listened to the majority of them, and you're such a great interviewer. And when you say about having come through the program and now being here, like, imagine my delight to see what people do after the program, and like the way that like my vision has always been that it would spread out farther. And like, that's what you're doing, right? You're reaching lots of people with these great messages and thoughts and questions and inquiries, and normalizing the comma. And so it's just so cool for me to see what you're doing.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And yes, right. Like there's even a takeaway in that, right? Like, do the thing because you love it. Do the thing because you know it's important, and trust that the ripples will go wherever they go. You may never see where the ripples go, but as long as you played a role in putting the ripples out there, then how cool is that?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's get into you, because today is your episode and it's your story and this is your platform today. So I want to introduce you to our listeners. So Cami, tell us a little bit about yourself. Let's start with how would you like to be known? And then what would you like people to know about you?
When I think about myself, I could probably come with more words than this, but I believe that I am an explorer. I am always looking for the next place to go, the deeper place to go with people. I believe that I am a creator. I have created many, many things in my business and my life that have been truly phenomenal for me. And I did a process one time recently about like how you see yourself and how people see you. And the word I came up with was conductor. I am the person at the front who doesn't really get, should not get the credit, who's not really doing the work, but is holding like the container for the work and is listening to where the music is off, and who's not participating, and who, could tone it down a little bit and what the music sounds like altogether. And that really resonates for me.
Those are powerful words. And I mean, selfishly, I would say, yes, I see all of these things in you. The conductor piece, especially, such a powerful description because of the roles that I've seen you in, obviously, in a variety of different environments. I definitely see that. And you're very skilled at that. There's some aptitude that maybe I can't find the words for. I'm sure you can, that makes that a really good place for you. because of how well you do it. And
Thank you.
definitely, you are definitely an explorer. And so many of us have experienced it in different ways. And we laugh, right? Like, so for the benefit of our listeners, right? Cami and I are probably going to chuckle about a couple of things along the way because they're sort of inside jokes. But the point is, like, you're so good at the exploring and the conducting, in my opinion, that it is always resourceful, even though sometimes it's not always fun, right?
Yeah, I was laughing because we were at this meeting with coaches like a month ago, right? And one of the coaches who I had worked with to some degree said, "I'm always afraid to come to the call with Cami," and I was like, "Oh man!" But I think that's why. I'm the deep diver. I'm going down under the rocks, below the water where it's super cold, and they just have those fish with a light on their head.
So descriptive. And it's always beneficial, right? Like doing the work and really discovering ourselves and getting in touch with ourselves isn't always fun, right? It is useful, it's purposeful, and it is beneficial, but it's not always fun. Same difference as exercising, right? Like I complain when I lift the weights, but I know that I need to lift the weights because there's so much that comes from it for me. So what else would you like? We're going to get to learn a lot about you through your story, but what else would you like people to know about you? Like, what do you do? I mean, what are some of the things you're involved in?
So my history is I live in Sacramento and I grew up in Southern California, and I came up here to go to law school. So I was a lawyer for 16 years. And then I magically fell into a coach training program. I just, through a series of events, was around a lot of coaches in this particular program. And I was just very excited about how they live their lives. And my sister and I were in these programs together. And so we decided to pursue this year-long training program, not really to be coaches, but just to learn what coaches know. And so that's how I became a coach. I feel like, and before that, people say like, find your passion and stuff like that. And like, I didn't even know what that meant until I tripped over it. And then I was like, this is what I remember. I came home from coach training and I said to my wife, I'm done practicing law. And that was it. That was it. Because like through our program, and you've done this as well, we coached people from the outside. In the quickness with which people's lives change is phenomenal, right? And so like, I was like, that's what I'm up to. And I did really fall into this purpose/passion. So that was about 15 years ago. And I've done many things. One of my favorite things to say is keep walking through the open doors. Like there have been things that I've done that just have arisen, and people have said, "Can you do this?" And I've been like, all right. So, and that'll be my story. But the what I do is I coach people individually. I mostly run a coach training program, the program you went through. We this year, Paul, will have graduated right around 50 people.
That's amazing.
It's just phenomenal to me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's to be acknowledged. And that's in what, 4 cohorts over a period of 5 years?
Yeah. It started in 2019. And in January of 2019, and in January of 2024, we'll graduate this class, which has 17 people in it. So I do a lot of things, but those are my main things. Those are my top things.
Well, and if I may, and I will.
Yeah.
The conductor, right? You found a path for yourself through the pandemic in a way I would say you thrived, and all these people who were looking for a pathway through the pandemic, you helped facilitate their journey.
Yeah, the pandemic was interesting for us because we were 2 months in to our program, which is 12 months long.
Yeah. Oh.
And so month 3, I said to them, we'll just skip this month. We'll just do like a Zoom call for 3 hours. And by the next month, I was like, oh, I'm going to do whole day long trainings on Zoom. And we did the whole rest of it on Zoom.
And came out shining. Yeah.
Not my preference, might I say, but yeah.
Again, doesn't always have to be fun to be fruitful.
I like how you say that. It's really true.
Yeah, really true. Cool. Well, let's get into your story. So, as I say with every guest, I haven't pre-screened your story. I don't know what you're going to be sharing with us, and I'm excited to hear it as well as everybody else, along with everybody else. And I always like to start with, what's your intention for yourself today with this podcast?
My intention for myself is to be vulnerable and honest and open about the internal aspects of my journey so that other people, like, I've heard this occur on your podcast more than once, like normalizing the struggle. Like, that's why I think normalizing the comma, right? Because I feel like people put their best presence out there and act like everything's easy.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, and I think there's, from working with people, what I know is there's a lot inside that doesn't feel easy. And so my intention is to share that part of my journey in a way that resonates for people so that they can appreciate that, like, yeah, follow your dream, right? Like, do the hard thing, but also, like, that might be really scary, like truly, deeply, darkly scary.
Yeah. That is so descriptive, and I honor that intention in you, and I want to support that intention by creating a space for you to be able to share the story in whatever way works for and resonates with you. And my hope and my intention is that in hearing your story, someone out there will feel connected to you in that story, feel a little bit less alone, feel perhaps a little bit more inspired, and maybe even empowered, so that maybe they treat themselves a little bit lighter, and perhaps somebody else that they encounter that day, they treat a little lighter than they normally would have.
I love that. Yes. Yes. May that be our intention always.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So true. Again, not always easy, not always fun, but always fruitful. So same 5 questions that I ask every guest in every episode, and let's jump in. Let's roll up our sleeves and get into the first one. So Cami, where have you found yourself sitting on a comma in your life?
Okay. So over the last probably 10 years, the most impactful event of my life was in 2018, when my mother, at the age of 80 years old, came to me and said, I would really like to be a coach. Would you train me to be a coach?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm sorry, what now? And I really thought about it. And I had, up until then, I had done a lot of trainings, lots of trainings. I had all the curriculum, and I definitely know how to be a coach. So at first I thought, no. And then I thought, okay, just her, just you. We'll sit down, we'll go week to week. I'll teach you what I know. And then, like a week later, 2 other people who I feel certain you will have on your podcast, Allie Goff and Tim Stevenson, married couple, came to me separately and said to me, have you thought about training people to be coaches? And the thing is, I really do feel like, I must heed the messages that come. And so I was like, so weird. My mom just asked me that. And here's my comma, Paul. My comma is and it really is a comma, right? It was not a period or a semicolon. It was genuinely a comma where I stopped, and what came through my mind was like, who am I? I was thinking about this morning about being on this podcast. And I was thinking about that. The 2 phrases that came in my head were, who am I? And I am not that person. And what it took for me to move past that, well, it was a lot of like psychological, like neurolinguistic programming. Like there were some hacks that happened which I can go into later. But this is the part that like feels really vulnerable to me, is that it was so, like, if you come to today, it's a dream, right? It's like no one has gone through this program and not been like a raving fan of it. I say that with much humility as I can muster. Like, but it's not me, right? It's the community, it's the program, it's the people who are in it. But even that, right? Even the thought of like, I'm just realizing as I'm talking, like, who am I in that moment translates to this moment of like, don't be too full of yourself. Don't be too braggy. Don't be too like, and I think what that comma was is like needing to be able to step into who would be that person in that moment.
I'd love to, we obviously do this in coaching, and I know I've talked about this in other episodes. I'd love to step in for just a moment, and you tell me if no, like I need to finish this thought. What comes up for me, I'm really curious. So you're at the beginning of this comma, and the thought comes to you, who am I? And I'm not that person. Who are we looking at? Who are you looking at in that moment? at that moment, like who was this person that you said, I'm not that person? Tell us about that. The thing or the person that you said, no, I'm not that, or I can't be that, or I don't want to be that.
I love that. What a great question that is. I could have used somebody asking me that question back then, by the way. It's very helpful.
Everything's easier in hindsight.
Well, and this is part of how I think I got here. First off, my trainer,
the
woman who trained me, trainers I had seen, people I looked up to, every teacher I ever had in my life, the great coaches that I know. Like I imagined this big, how do I even say it? This huger than life, glowing human that was very out of reach for me. Number one. Number two, it does come back a little bit to like the cockiness. Like, who would I need to, like, how full of myself would I need to be to say, oh, I can train people to be coaches? You know, like that also still comes up for me, frankly. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. I was going to say, like, let me just say it. So it seems like two things come out of it. There's this kind of grand idealized persona based on how you compare yourself to these other people who it sounds like have been role models in your life, or at least, examples or some kind of model in your life. And then there's this, when you say that's not me, but what is me is cocky, or I don't remember the exact words you used, but you specifically said cocky or too big for myself or what have you. Interesting that those two personas seem to kind of come up.
Well, I mean, not who is me, but the second one, but like, who would I need to be?
Okay.
I would need to be a person who could say, I'm the trainer.
Gotcha.
Right? What made me the trainer?
Okay. So there was something about this kind of idealized role model, and then this, in order to be that person, that might make me a certain way.
Yeah. The boldness of stepping into a dream that is that big. And then if I do that, I've got to say, I am that person. If I'm doing the thing, I got to be that person. Right. And that's so terrifying. Well, that I was pretty sure I wasn't that person.
What was terrifying about it?
And because I think for a little bit, and just during the comma, because I don't think most of this is still occurring in the same way for me now, but just during that comma moment of not, will I do this training? I was worried about so many things. I was worried about how people would see me, that other people would think the same thing, right? Like what makes you so special? How do you get to do this?
So it sounds like a lot of energy being put into kind of outside of yourself. Who do I have to be? And then what are the other people going to say, or how are they going to react, or what are they going to say about me?
Yeah, that's a good point. Tell me if I'm getting ahead of your questions, because I think that it was being able to go inside was the thing that got me off the comma.
Well, put a pin in that, because we'll definitely come back to that. So here you are, you're at this point, and, we can look back now in retrospect and my gosh, you've come a long way and so forth. But what we really want to do is kind of spend a little time unpacking what was that like for you. So when you're at this point, which by the way, sounds very like scary, to be honest.
Yeah.
What did that create for you? You're at this point, and now you've been kind of issued this challenge, and you're going through this work of kind of trying to unpack who do I have to be in order to be there?
Yeah.
So what happens? What happens while you're sitting on this comma?
I really think I've like blanked out that part because it was so challenging for me. I think what happened was I started looking at it. Well, I believe a lot in like the messages that you get. And so I really started looking at, could I do this? How could I do this? And then one other person actually chose to be in the program. And I think that I asked her. And so once I asked somebody, then it was mine, then I was like, oh, there's going to be a program. Right. But even then, Paul, I remember this so clearly. I was like, just the four of them, just the four of you, nobody else. We'll just go to a coffee shop somewhere, and, it'd be super informal, because I was still trying to play it small. I had a huge dream, which I didn't even know was a dream. I didn't even know I wanted, by the way. I'll just play it really small. I'll do it really like safe, and so nobody can see it. Just for these individual people. And that was, again, the comma. And I remember that comma too. The comma was like this fourth person, that choice point for me between genuinely, am I going to do this in my living room? or am I going to create a training? Because I've been creating trainings throughout my entire career. I know what that looks like. It does not look like 4 people in my living room, right? It looks like putting a stake in the ground and like choosing a venue and choosing a number and going for it.
Yeah. Well, so let me kind of reflect that, because what you're saying is you also had a barometer. It sounds like having done trainings before, knowing what it takes to put trainings together. And as you said, maybe I didn't know it was a dream yet, but you knew this was big, and that in order to do this in a training could mean something really, really big. And yet you're like, I'm okay if it's just 4 people, and I can kind of keep this fill in the blank.
Safe.
Oh, interesting.
Safe and invisible.
Interesting.
And I think that's been a part of my journey. The thing is that I'm a very introverted person. I mean, people don't really buy that when they see me, and I've taught myself to be different, but I really am. And I say very introverted because when I was a child, like I was really like shy and small, and I use the word invisible because I genuinely, if you see the movie Chicago, there's a song called Cellophane, and it's all about being invisible. And he says, you can look right through me, walk right by me, and never know I'm there. And like, I was good at it. I was really, really good at it. And I think, showing up, drawing attention to myself is very challenging for me. And so I think that was my thought, was I could do this and nobody will see me. Nobody will know. It'll be okay.
And yet it didn't stay that way. It didn't stay that small.
It's true.
So how did that happen for you to be kind of playing it safe and keeping it small and invisible, and then it didn't stay there? Like, how did it keep going? How did it grow? What happened from there?
Yeah. Well, there was a point. There's a choice point, and it really does have to do with the comma, right? Like there's a point maybe that's true of commas, right? You make a decision. And I made a decision. And I'm not sure why, but it goes back to like, I think that it was that internally I started to ask myself why I wanted to do this. And I stopped asking what people would think of me, or what the danger was, or what's scary about it. And I was like, why do I want to do this? And the truth is, it goes back to what we said at the beginning of the interview. I really believe in coaching. Like I've seen people absolutely change their lives through coaching. And being introverted, I could work with one person one-on-one, and I was still very, very, very safe. Right. But to be a trainer in front of a room, far less introverted. But what I knew was, people, like if I could train people to make that kind of difference in the world, then look at the like exponential benefit, right? There are like 50 people out there because they chose this program, because I chose to do the scary thing, who are affecting other people in some way. Like I just interviewed a woman who's coming into the next program, and I said, why do you want to do this? And she said, I want to be a contribution to the people in my life. It's so powerful to me. It's so powerful that people who do this work want to contribute to other human beings. And I think when I started to look at that, then I was like, okay, then let's have an actual program. I don't mean years down the road, because I think, like every year I'm like, will I keep doing this? I was not thinking beyond that year. But I did start thinking, okay, if you're going to do this with 4 people, get a room, have an agenda, fill up the room. And I think it came out of my purpose. I just think it came out of my like real desire for people to be empowered and to empower others.
It's really such a big story, and it's a powerful story. And I want to dig in on something that I think will be really helpful to people. So what I heard you say is, I started to get clear on my what and my why, and you've described that for us. And what I think might really be interesting for people to hear is, you said, I stopped worrying about this and I stopped worrying about that. And we hear that all the time. This is the decision I finally made, or this is the transition I made. How did you do that in that moment, given everything that you've shared with us? Like, what did that on a day look like?
God, I wish I remembered, Paul. Here's going to be my guess. We go back to the blackout moment, dig in, try to remember. Here's where I think it came from. I think, knowing me, It came from talking to people.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm a person, like until then, I have this business by myself, 100% by myself. Nobody to bounce anything off of. Before I trained coaches, I didn't have anybody around me other than Kelly Mobeck. Shout out Kelly Mobeck, who was always on my team, but really that was it. And I talked to a lot of people. I talked to my mom about it. I talked to my friends about it. I talked to Kelly about it. And here's the thing. Now that I say her name, I'm remembering she said to me, I was like, I don't know if I can. And she said, you absolutely can and you should. And she's my mentor coach, right? And so I think this is the power of coaching. She looked at me and she was like, I have been waiting for you to do this. I've been wondering when you were going to do this. People want me to do it and I'm not doing it, but you are the one. You're the one who should be doing this. And every step of the way, she has said that to me. So I think it is the fact that I talked to people and I got a lot of reflection back of you should really do this. And that started to like empower me, kind of like I always think of the high dive as my metaphor for jumping, because when I was a kid, I'd get on the high dive and I'd walk out to the very end and then I would just stand there and try to talk myself into jumping in the water. Right? Like the regular people, they just run down the thing. I was like, I'm gonna stand here and think about this for a while. And that's what I was doing, right? I was on the high dive, just thinking about it. And it was kind of like, that I had people on the ground going like, it's okay. And also you're really good at this. And I think that helped me get past worrying about all the other things, what people would think of me and how this might, look to people. And I think throughout this entire journey, it has been that. It has been people like you saying like, no, you should be doing this. And I realized as I talk to you that I think that's really impactful. And like, if there's a thing I would wish that people would do, it's that they would tell other people what they see in them. Because I think that's what happened for me, is that I said, oh, I have this scary idea. I don't know if I'm any good at it. And people said, no, absolutely. You have to do this. And they were so genuine about it that I could sort of see myself reflected in them.
Yeah. Well, and in a way, what I see, and you can tell me if I'm off the mark on this reflection, but the thing you did kind of in the dark that was like okay, how did I get from idea to the envisioning, all the kind of like the everyday stuff, was talk to people about it. And what it sounds like is you talk to people that would challenge you, whether maybe you knew you were doing that at the time or not. You can tell us, but you definitely talk to people who like push you into the scary thing. So there's that commentary, which is just the value, as you've already said, of share your ideas, talk to people, put it out there in the universe, right? And like you said with the metaphor, like there's people on the ground. I'm thinking about this, but there's people on the ground who are going to support me no matter what I do. And one other thing you said, it's very, very subtle, but the regular people would just run and jump.
Yeah.
Notice how we do that too, right? Is that in and of itself is a point of comparison. If I'm sitting here studying it or thinking about it, then there must be something different about me, because the regular people, I'm doing air quotes on the camera, would be doing it differently. That's just kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, that was part of the voice in my head, right? Like, you're not good at this. You're too shy. You're too scared. You're too nervous. You have to think about things too much. The regular people just jump off the high dive. Not true, but how my brain processes it, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there are people who do that, but it's not necessarily all the people, right? It doesn't make them any more right or any more normal or regular, right? That's such powerful stuff. Oh my gosh. And we could talk, I could pressure you for more details, but let's zoom back out to the question. So you've done this thing, you put it out there, you've gotten feedback, and you've taken advantage of coaching and coaches, and basically, and by the way, I want to also acknowledge, and you said, and I booked the room and I created an agenda. And so I'm hearing you're like, I kind of did one little step at a time too.
Very much so. That was very much how I got into it.
One step at a time. Okay.
Yeah, because I often say to people, if you would have said to me in 2018, hey, Cami, we have a job for you. You are going to go in this room and you're going to train these people. Here's a program. or it's your program or whatever, and there's gonna be 17 people in this room and you're gonna have 4 people on your staff, will you go do that? I would say absolutely not. There's no way on God's green earth that I would even want to do that, right? Well, maybe I did want to do it. I probably did want to do it actually. But when I said, oh, there's 4 people, how about I see if I can get to 10 people this year only? This branding program, which by the way, Paul, was half price of a very already low price, because that was my safety also. Like, you guys give me the feedback, you come in for super cheap, right? Like all the safety around me. So I didn't feel too like terrified. It was step by step. You know, it was like just this year. And I never thought to go beyond that year. At that point in the inception, I never thought I'm training my mother and probably that'll be it.
Yeah. And yet here it is. And I'm curious, you said, because I didn't want to do it. Well, maybe I did want to do it. Was the comma, maybe I'm leading, I don't know. I'm curious. Was the comma about wanting to do it or being able to do it?
Oh,
at the beginning, you know, the origin of it all.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's not relevant. I'm curious.
I think it's probably true. It was about wanting to do it because why else would I have a comma that said like, can you actually do this? Is this actually you? Because I think the thing that I'm realizing as we talk is all the dreams that I've had in my life that I didn't know I had. Because once I got into doing this, I remembered after my coach training program, which was also a year, 9 months, something like that, and they also had a staff, I went on the staff the following year. And I remember sitting in that room. I remember there's a moment, you know how you remember like something strikes you and they're like, and this person was sitting here and I was at this table and this was happening in the room.
Oh, yeah.
And all that happened in that moment, Paul, was I thought to myself, if I could do this, support students in becoming coaches for the rest of my life, I would be the happiest person on the planet. And that was like 2008. And when I got there, you know, here, I was like, oh, I did want to do this, but I was not bold enough to even consciously have the dream. You know, I didn't even ever say like, oh, someday I'll train coaches.
Yeah. It's amazing, right? Like oftentimes we'll come to some revelation or some self-discovery and it feels like it's brand new. And then kind of after that glow wears off a little bit, you're like, actually, no, I had thought about that before. Or you'll stumble on a journal entry or a paper you wrote or something like that. And it's like, holy shit, I wrote about this when I was 6 years old, right? And I guess my point in going there with you and then reflecting this back as well is like, that's really kind of one of the fundamental questions and invitations for each of us, isn't it? When we start feeling that resistance, is it that I want or don't want the thing? Or is it actually you do want it and there's something else really? Like kind of where do I put my attention? And that's all part of the unpacking and the discovery. But so many of us like, oh, I don't think I want to do it. Is that really true?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
I bet you do. And I bet we do. You're just scared to death of it. Well, that's a different thing to focus on than wanting or not wanting, right? So much to unpack there. What a cool story. So we're looking at all of this. Then what have you learned about yourself as a result of this situation, this comma that you've been describing to us?
Okay, I'm gonna limit to the comma because, gosh, I've learned so much. Chunking things down is very, very powerful. You know, one step at a time. You do not have to. Martin Luther King Jr. said, you do not have to see the entire staircase to take the first step in faith. And yeah, I don't, even though we work, as you know, as coaches a lot with what's your vision in 5 years, I often don't know what it is, but I keep on taking the next step. And if a door opens up, I keep on, you know, like I seriously consider all the doors that open up for me. Some people say you have to believe you can do a thing in order to do it. And I don't agree with that. I think you can just be bold enough to do it and you'll start believing you can do it. One of the metaphors one of my friends gave me was, she said, it's like roller skating down a really steep hill. Like when you were a little kid and you got going faster and faster and faster. And at some point you're like, oh crap, like how will I stop? You know, it's being willing to do something like that. And I think that, you know, we all have stories about ourselves, right? And my story was like shy kids don't get up in front of the room. And you have to be a certain kind of a person to do certain kinds of work. I always really, really looked up to like teachers and all of that. And I just thought they were somebody else. And I think that you can step into something not believing you were that person, and then you become that person. And so I think that what I've learned is to do things that I'm not sure. I don't want to say that I can do, because I knew I could do it. Like, I know I can do this work, but to step into things where like I'm not sure I'm that person yet. Because one of the things in the first graduation speech that I gave for coach training, what I said was, people come to coaching because they want something. They want a better job. They want a better relationship. They want more money. They want better fitness, whatever. And what happens for clients in coaching is not just that they get that thing, but that they realize they are the person who could have that thing. And it's that, like, I can say that because that was my experience. Like, if I do the thing, well, then guess what? I'm going to be the person who can do the thing.
It's like the ability versus, for the sake of this, the ability versus the identity. And that's literally what you've been saying, right? You're like, I don't have any doubt that I can do the thing, but who do I have to be? And then, as you already kind of said, talking about all these teachers and role models who you already placed in a certain identity category.
Yeah. Yeah. I learned that I don't have to be there before I take the step. It's the same thing, basically. I learned that I'm very courageous. I learned that I'm very committed. And that's the common learning. I've learned much more from training coaches. Like, incredible. Could like write a book and, may do so at some point. But the look on your face, Paul.
Oh yeah, you know where I was going. Dad, do I hear a declaration? No, I'm just teasing you. If you had used maybe a little bit more language around that, I would, but I'm not going to. So, unless you want to. Writing a book, you were saying.
I probably will. Actually, I'm reading, as probably the whole world that follows me knows, Rick Rubin's The Creative Act. And and halfway through it, I was like, oh, I'm writing a book on coaching. Like, I'm writing a book on this, like the deep way of being of coaching.
I want to come back to what you said, though. Like, this is what I learned from the comma, and then there's so much more that I could even write a book about it. But would it be fair to say that the so much more came from the learning from the comma? I mean, as you already said, like, don't the earlier steps lead to the later steps on the path?
Well, I came from, tell me if this is right, Paul, because this is your metaphor. I came from getting off the comma.
Yeah. Okay.
I came from the I got off, I learned, I got off, and now I'm here, like, and I wouldn't be able to do this work the way I do this work if I hadn't gone through that, right? Like, this from going through the program. Like, one of the things that we talk a lot about is if you don't challenge yourself in that way, then it's going to be nearly impossible to challenge anybody else in that way. And so, having learned like what it feels like to have something you want and tell yourself you can't have it, now I'm aware, because people come to coaches because they have big things that they want, and they have told themselves they can't have it.
And look at how you moved yourself along that journey. The next question I want to ask is, what has changed for you as a result of sitting on this comma and getting off of it, since we're talking kind of in past tense? But what has changed for you?
Well, my whole business changed.
Just a little thing.
I mean, just a little thing. Yeah. I mean, truly, I didn't even know the magnitude of it, because I really did not have a big network of coaches. Like, coaches, like any service-based entrepreneur, like if you're a small business service entrepreneur, you can isolate yourself very easily. And I just really didn't hang out with anybody, other than I did have Kelly, who was my mentor, and good on me that like I remembered to do that, to have a coach. But oh man, I have a community of coaches around me. Like, I call all of these coaches for coaching. I call them for brainstorming. I call you for brainstorming. I call all of the people who have been through this program as colleagues now, as people who support each other, including me. And that has changed my entire life. And many of them, I would say, are my friends as well, if not the vast majority of them. And that was a really unforeseen benefit. And I shouldn't even say benefit, too light of a word. Like, there's a lot of studies on the importance of community. And I didn't really have this kind of community until now. And it's a community of like-minded people, right? It's a community of people who tell the truth to each other and want to lift each other up and want to support each other
Mm-hmm.
and want to, and will be honest and challenging with each other and will give tirelessly of their time and their energy. That's an incredible community to be a part of. And so now I have so much more around me that reflects like, yes, keep going. This, you can do this, because it continues to be a scary, daunting task.
And yet it sounds like it's become safer.
I think it has, Paul. I think the safety has come in doing, for some reason, metaphors just keep coming to me, but just like doing the scary thing over and over and over again doesn't become less scary. You just realize you won't die.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's happened. The first year, I'll tell you something, the first year, man, I stood in front of that room and I was so afraid that people were mad at me all the time. All the time. Do they agree with me? Do they like what I'm saying? Are they unhappy with me? And then over the years, I had people who were like, I don't want to work with this person and I'm not going to work with this person. And the first couple of times that happened, I was like, oh no, what's happening? And now I have this paradigm that says like, people probably should struggle a little bit. People probably are like, you might not be doing your job. But people are not a little bit annoyed right now. Yeah. It shifted. My original paradigm was like, nobody should ever get mad at you. And my current paradigm is like, you get to hold this safe place for people to be grappling with themselves, and people do what they do when they grapple with themselves, right? Like some of them disappear, some of them get mad at you.
Mm-hmm.
And that also changed my whole life, changed all my relationships to learn that to try to be smooth sailing in relationships it might not be the goal.
Well, and first of all, I want to say that that's very profound. That's also kind of moving some cheese for some people, to use, the book title. And that kind of ties into some of what you were saying earlier, right? Or what we were talking about kind of in the beginning when we were having some fun with each other, is like, it doesn't always have to be fun to be fruitful or what have you. Like, so much of our society, I'll speak for myself, right? That's all I can speak for. Oftentimes I'm looking for the easiest, smoothest path, and the most comfortable is the goal, but it's not always what serves me the best. And as I too have kind of shifted and learned and starting to grow and stretch, is like, okay, the bumpier road may actually have something more on it for me. And I can mentally prepare for the bumps as much as I can. But what would avoiding that road actually create or not create for me, right?
I love that. You're reminding me of a quote. I'm going to paraphrase it. The goal of life is not to arrive at the end safely. The goal is to slide in with a glass of wine in one hand, chocolate in the other, screaming, "Wow, what a ride!"
Yeah, yes. I've seen memes like that too on social. Yeah, exactly. What a huge, that is a lot of things that have changed very significantly for you as a result of this. I mean, this has I can see what a huge impact this journey has had on you. And I've been, the recipient of what you've been able to create as a result of that too. So I can speak to it from that point of view. There was something else that I wanted to reflect in there, and it's evaded me. So if it comes back, it comes back. And if not, then the universe wanted to hold it instead. Let's go to the last question. I think you've already answered a lot of this question, but I want to give you a chance to add to it or enhance your answer to that. And that is, what does getting off the comma look like for you? Or what is getting off the comma like for you?
I want to say that it means to take what I've learned from that experience and use it going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Like remembering that all the lessons that I learned. Because every time I have a new bold thing, right? Like you and I have been talking recently, I'm not going to go into this, but this is my example of like licensing some of my stuff. Mm-hmm. And there it is again. Like, who am I to like, how is this going to really, like, you're not that person.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what it means is to remember going forward, like that will be the conversation you will have. The conversation is, who are you to do that? And knowing, I am a firm believer that the best thing that you can learn as a human being is to recognize your stuff so that you can say, oh, my stuff. That's my voice. That's the voice that comes up in my head when I'm trying to do something really big, which means you should move forward If it wasn't really big, you wouldn't hear that voice. And we want to do, we want to do the big things like that. That is the goal for me in life, is to just have the most fun and affect the most people. And that's the big scary stuff.
I love that. And I'm sitting here trying to come up with a metaphor for that, but I don't have one. So I'm just going to say it like what I'm hearing you say too is, when you've done it enough times, it becomes a little safer, right? Or at least you get a little bit more comfortable doing it. And you also start to look for the things that used to be barriers or obstacles. And now you can kind of move them to the side and they become sort of like accessories to the journey. So this who am I isn't the block anymore, but it's not going to go away. It's kind of like that's the curtains on the window and I can walk past it, but they're going to show up again.
Yeah.
They don't have to stop me.
Yeah. I like that. It's the curtains on the window. Well, what I want to think about is like, if you were walking through a door, what is in that door frame, right? Like, is it concrete? Because if it feels like concrete, it's hard to move past it. But the more I get familiar with it, the more that I am like, oh, the curtains, right? This is a thing I push past. It doesn't have to stop me. My son told me the other day that somebody told him that the human brain is like a toddler. You don't have to believe everything it says.
Yeah.
To be like, oh, that's a really interesting story, right? Like, you can't do that. People will think this of you. Like if that was coming from a 3-year-old, you'd be like, that's fascinating. That sounds like a crazy person talking, And I was like, what a great way to put it, because I think that's true. You do not need to listen to your brain.
Yeah.
Your brain will tell you all sorts of random things and you can decide what you're going to do with it.
And it can be pretty simple and straightforward, right? Like, I don't know that I've mastered the overcoming what my brain is telling me in the daytime, but I did. I used to have, bad dreams from time to time. And if I woke up in the middle of the night, whatever I was dreaming was reality. And somewhere along the way, I got it in my head that's like, never believe what you think when you're asleep.
Yeah.
And so it turned into this weird thing that's like, if I woke up after having had a nightmare or worrying about the worst case scenario at work or whatever, like just recognizing, oh, it's the middle of the night. This is just, there's nothing true about this. Wake up in the morning and totally forgotten all about it.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I'm sure there's some NLP magic in there you could put a label on.
I think don't believe everything you think.
Yeah. Love that. Cami, we are going to wrap things up here. I would love to ask you, what would you acknowledge yourself for right now?
Well, that's the most real and vulnerable way I've ever told that story. Like, usually I skip over all the parts about my own personal self-talk and stuff. And I always get scared to talk about myself. And like, I think I have some old belief that I don't really subscribe to anymore, that like I've got to look like I've got all my shit together in order for people to, respect and learn from me and all of that. And I have learned the opposite is true. However, I still buy it sometimes, right? So like being able to talk about myself in this sort of uncomfortable way, I would acknowledge that about myself today, Paul.
Well, and I would thank you for bringing that vulnerability and that courage into the episode and sharing that with us, because I think we are all going to benefit from it. And it's ironic because that which you believe, those of us out here, for all it matters, and it shouldn't, we do see you as having your shit together. So there's just an irony there.
Thank God.
Right? There's just an irony there, right? So thank you for that. So tell us, Cami, where can people find you?
Okay, so my website is McLaren Coaching. If you're interested in coach training, it's there. It says coach training. My email is there. My phone number is there. I am always happy to talk to people and offer complimentary coaching calls so people can see like what coaching is and what my personal style is. Because if you're going to work with me as a coach or as a trainer, well, if you're going to work with me as a coach, you have to feel like my style's a fit. If you're going to work with me as a trainer, I think that's true also, but you also probably have to like me a little bit, because like you're going to be with me a lot for a long time. And if you're really like that person, then I might not be your gal.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll put that information in the show notes. And then I extend this invitation to everyone who's on the show. So is there any an individual, a cause, an organization who is important to you and that you'd like to take this opportunity to boost them or lift up their voice or give them a little exposure that they might not always get?
Oh, I love that question. And thank you for giving me like prompting examples. The group that came to my mind is always my top organization is called CASH. It's the Community Against Sexual Harm. Terry Galvin used to be the head of that organization. You should interview her sometime, but it's now Sawan Vadan, who you should also, I hope I said Baden. I hope I said her last name right, but she's correct. She's a phenomenal person, and you should reach out to her. They do great work with sex trafficking and specifically sex workers in Sacramento, and giving them a door, to walk through. And Turning Point Community Programs, an amazing organization. You should interview Alexis Bernard because she's very high up there, and it's just such a giving organization. I'm not going to try to say what they do. Look them up. I feel like it's getting more dangerous to say what people do and be wrong. So I'm just going to say they're
well, and I'll take that one for you, because I always, when I put the links in the show notes, I'll copy paste or paraphrase whatever their mission statement is or what have you on the website. So that will be accurately reflected for posterity for you, so you don't have to worry about that piece. So
thank you. And an offshoot of them is Welcome Home Housing, which does similar work. I believe they work on housing for people with mental illness. And then, Paul, you said coffee shop, so I'm going to shout out Drip.
Okay.
Drip Espresso in Sacramento, Black woman-owned small coffee shop that is just fantastic, and I love them, and I think that they should get a lot of exposure.
Wonderful. Well, I'm looking forward to giving all of these folks the acknowledgments from you, and I'll be tagging them in the posts on social media as well. And any of these organizations who I don't know these folks or haven't been to their establishment, I'll be checking those out as well, as I like to do.
I love that. Like, when you first said it to me, I'm like, what? And I literally could stand here and probably give you 10 more. I
suspected that was the case. I suspected that was the case. I love it. Cami, thank you so much. I have so enjoyed this, and I'm really looking forward to this being part of the collection and to being able to put your story out in the universe with all of these others and all these amazing people. So thank you for, your vulnerability today and for sharing your story. And of course, you and I will be talking again very soon because of some of the things we're working on together.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. It's just really an honor, and I'm so glad you're doing this, and I'm so glad I got to be on it.
Thank you so much. What an honor it is to witness these stories from these amazing human beings, and today's guest was no exception. I invite you to think about what you learned from this conversation. What stood out for you? What challenged you? What inspired you? And I encourage you to write it down in some form of journaling and reflection. I can't tell you how magical it can be to set aside your expectations and just let your thoughts flow out of your head and onto paper. You don't have to have an agenda. You don't have to do anything with it, but you can be amazed at what comes out of your thoughts and onto paper and what that can do for you. I know freestyle journaling has been a powerful practice in my life for a very long time. You just never know what you might discover about yourself. Thank you for listening to this episode of Off the Comma. Follow me on social media at Off the Comma, and also look for upcoming workshops and events at offthecomma.com, or better yet, go to offthecomma.com and sign up for my mailing list and let me bring the news directly to you. I am passionate about keeping this podcast ad-free so that we create a safe container for people to be able to tell their stories uninterrupted by commercials and promotions. I currently cover all the production costs, and I'm happy to continue doing so. And I'm also open to and appreciative of any donations that anyone would like to contribute. This is nothing more than to be able to support the podcast and cover some of the monthly editing and producing and equipment costs that are associated with this podcast. So look for the donations link in the podcast descriptions wherever you find this podcast. Be sure to like this episode, follow the podcast, and more importantly, spread the good word. If you were moved by today's conversation, pass it along to someone you care about. As always, keep noticing.